Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today on Interviews with Experts. It's great to see you.
Nice to see you, Georgia. Thanks for inviting me on.
Not a problem. So for those of you tuning in, Charlie Redding is an author, he's a speaker, and he's a founder of Efficient Portfolio, a financial services firm. Charlie is a fantastic guest to have on. He's the author of 3 different books. He is published via 3 different routes, so traditional publishing, hybrid publishing, and self-publishing. So he's here today to talk to us about each one of those and the results that he's found in his business and when building his profile. Charlie, do you mind first of all telling us the names of your 3 books?
Yeah, of course. So we have the first one, which was published in 2015, is The Dream Retirement, How to Secure Your Money and Retire Happy. The second one, which was published in, I think, 2018, but I'm actually not 100% sure on that, is Smart Money, How to Create Financial Freedom. And the third one, which was published this year, not necessarily the best year to publish a book, but we'll find out shortly, is called Entrepreneurial Happiness, How to Build a abundant business and fulfilling life.
Perfect, thank you. And congratulations, by the way, because that one came out really recently, didn't it?
It did. It came out right in the middle of lockdown, which was an interesting experience. So the book launch was all done on Zoom, which was better than no book launch, but it's not quite the same as we had. We didn't really do a book launch for Smart Money, but we had a really lovely book launch for The Dream Retirement. So it was disappointing not to be able to do that. It's difficult to tell how much the COVID effect has impacted the publishing and the sales of that book. Actually, to be fair, the sales, I don't know any numbers for it yet, because it's still too early after publishing to get any data out of the publisher. But it's certainly been a different experience this year. But yeah, it was, in a way, I think it's maybe perfect timing, because there's so much talk about happiness and well-being and work-life balance. And ultimately that book is about generating more money for your business and for you as the business owner. But it's also about the work-life balance and about how, work should be a fun experience. And I think there's been a lot of thought this year about, reevaluating that work-life balance, thinking, do you know what, do I really love what I do, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, or sometimes a lot longer than 9 to 5. So I think actually in a way the book's timed perfectly with that. That said, the publishing route has been challenging during the lockdown process.
Yes, I can imagine. It's been a really strange time. And I think actually at the beginning of the lockdown, when it first kind of came over here, the publishing industry was one of the first hit, wasn't it? Because of the London Book Fair. And that was in March, that was cancelled. And that was sort of like 20,000 people from, it's one of the biggest in the world, deals get signed. So the publishing industry had its sort of shock and everything a little earlier than some other industries. But then having said that, has also come out the other side a little earlier, or at least several publishers have, with realising that it's just created a need for certain titles, so self-development and virtual related titles. And I think your book, Entrepreneurial Happiness, ties into that really well.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that will prove to be the case. Only time will tell. But it certainly was. The Lid, the company that published Entrepreneurial Happiness, were furloughing people, and I think they had to make some people redundant as well. So it's obviously a very difficult time for them. And the feedback we were getting was that retailers just weren't taking newly published books because, of course, they'd got no shops open to be able to sell them. So it was a really challenging time for that sector, and clearly that's going to impact us in that process. But hopefully, if the book's the right book, it shouldn't impact it in the long run.
Yes, definitely. It's a good way to look at it. And so this one then, this is sort of a more of a traditional publishing setup. What were the expectations that you had COVID not happened? What were the sort of hopes and aspirations for this book published in that way?
Well, I suppose it's worth talking about why I decided to look at the traditional publishing route for this book. So for me, The Dream Retirement was all about talking about what we did as a business. So that's not exclusively what it was about, because about 50% of that book was all about, I suppose, about the money side of retirement, what we do for our clients on a day-to-day basis, how we help them create the dream retirement from a financial perspective. But the other half of that book was more about time in retirement and your well-being in retirement. And so I could never see that being, I mean, I went into Waterstones before I published that book, and went on on Piccadilly, and went to the personal finance section, and there wasn't one book on retirement. And I thought, so that means this is either going to go absolutely wild, or there's no market for books on retirement. I suspect it's the latter. So we didn't ever look for a traditional publisher for that, or the second book, and I'll explain why when we talk about that. But this time, I felt that Entrepreneurial Happiness was a much more generic book for business owners, and it's, as I said, it's really about generating more money for you and your business, generating a better work-life balance, but also enjoying what you do in your work life more. And so we felt that it worked well from a traditional publishing perspective. And actually, initial conversations with companies like Kogan Page and some others whose name escapes me now were really promising. They loved the title, they loved the concept. The biggest battle I had was that I was approaching these companies once I was 95% written. I'd nearly finished I was finishing a book that was going to be about 90,000 words, which is about the same size as The Dream Retirement. So a decent sized book, but too big a book apparently. And the feedback we kept getting was, for a book like this, we'd want to cap it out at 60,000 words. And to start with, I was really resistant to that. And so I turned down a number of offers that were about turning it into a 60,000 word book, just because I couldn't see, I built the book around a system, a unique business system that you would know from your time with Andy Harrington. And so I built this system, and it wasn't the sort of thing where I could go, well, okay, this bit's slightly less important, I'll drop that. Because that meant the whole system fell apart and needed redesigning. So I really didn't want to do, I was really hesitant to that. But as I spoke to more and more publishers, and all but one, which essentially was a hybrid publishing solution, all but one said, for this book, it's got to be 60,000 words. And the reason was because they were saying that for a self-development book, if you have more than 60,000 words, the cost of the book is too great for the retailer. Therefore, they've got to charge more than they want to charge for it, and they just won't take it. So in the end, I gave in, and I said, well, I'll get the manuscript down to 70-ish thousand words. I think I got it down to 72, and then they did the final cut down to just below 60,000. And then I said, well, yeah, but you've taken a couple of bits out that were key, so we got it, and it ended up being pretty much bang on 60,000. And I'm sure it's a better book for that, because we went through it and said, well, okay, is that quite as strong as we want it to be? But so that was why we went down that route, and it is a more mainstream book than the other two that we've done, and the hope is that we will use that to generate more. I think when you're publishing a book for a business, you've got to think of it, well, okay, how can this generate the most amount of business for for our company? And it isn't going to be selling books. You're not going to get rich selling books unless you're, J.K. Rowling. I know that's, clearly you can get rich selling books, but as she will prove. But as a business owner, it's highly unlikely you're going to get rich selling books. You've got to think about how you can use the tool. And we had used Dream Retirement very effectively. We didn't use Smart Money as well, actually, but we published it for a slightly different reason. And so Entrepreneurial Happiness, we decided we'd got an opportunity for it to get into mainstream retailers, and that would generate more leads that way than just giving it out and using it as a business tool, which we will still do. So that was the hope. Only time will tell whether that is the right way to go. But it does potentially bring in a very different audience.
Oh, how so? That's interesting.
Well, because if it ends up on the shelves of W.H. Smith, for example, people buy that book that we'd have never got the book to. Yeah. Now, that still happens when you've gone through the hybrid or the self-publishing route. One of our top clients came to us as a result of, I spoke at an event. It was the annual conference of management accountants, and I was chatting to one of the attendees afterwards, and I just said, oh, you can have a copy. I brought a few of my books. I don't really want to take them home here. Have a copy of my book. So he took that away. He ended up giving it to a client of his. That client read it. The client already had a financial planner, or financial advisor, really, not a financial planner. And he read the book. And when he sold his business, he didn't have the faith in his existing advisor. So he came directly to us as a result of that book. So it still does happen when you've got a self-published or a hybrid published route. But clearly, if it's on the shelf of W.H. Smith and people are picking it up as they go through an airport or whatever, you're getting a very different audience that you wouldn't get. And also, potentially an international audience, which then leads on to more public speaking and all of that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so it is a great way to reach more people, because the other way of getting a message out en masse like that is, I don't know, take internet marketing, for example, and advertising online. And that's different because you're more open to sort of anyone, aren't you? Whereas the people who buy the book specifically want to buy a book to read about that topic. They don't just they're not presented with the book. They, seek out books of that nature because they want to be educated on it. So it's a much deeper qualification process in a marketing sense.
But I do think that it's, with the benefit of hindsight, the attraction of being able to do what we call a shelfie. You walk into a shop and you see your own book and you can take a photo with it, and that's a lovely thing. And the more I probed with these different publishers, the top selling business books that each of them had, with the very odd exception, but the top selling ones for almost all companies have sold about 10,000 copies. That's the top selling one. So that's not actually a huge audience, is it? With Dream Retirement, which was hybrid published, we bought 3,000 copies. We've got rid of, one way or another, about 2,500. We've probably still got 500 copies in storage. But so we've achieved a quarter of that impact without having, without it ever being on W.H. Smith or any bookshelf really ever, other than on that, on Amazon, which I think is and of course then there's I'm not taking into account the number of Kindle copies and the audiobook copies that have been sold, which isn't huge in numbers, but if you can achieve that on your own, that really surprised me actually. I thought, the odd book, I think one of the publishers we were speaking to had got 100,000 selling book, but it was one in a blue moon, and so that's, I think, whether I would do the same again, I think I probably would. I think I was doing it, writing that book again, what I would do differently is, before I wrote it, I would speak to the publishers, because I think with that book it still has a good opportunity to be a good business book on the shelves. But I would have approached the publishers earlier, worked out what they wanted, worked out whether it fitted, and then I would have written the book slightly more in tune with what they were looking for, or just dismissed it at that point and said, right, no, we're going down the hybrid route again, or the self-published route again, because I don't think I went about it in the right way, really.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And I think it's quite common in a way to, like you say, you write the book, it seems logical that the writing would come first and then figure out the publishing when it's time to think about publishing. As you say, publishers typically do all have very specific guidelines, don't they? But talk to me about the hybrid route then, with the Dream Retirement. This is the first of the three, and this was brought out, was it 2017?
2015.
15, sorry, right.
2015.
Of course,
I think
smart money, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was just around the time that you were launching Right Business Results.
Yes, that's right.
And so that was an interesting route. So I'd started writing the book. I'd been at where I met you at Strategic Coach. I was at a Strategic Coach workshop in 2012, and one of my fellow coach members said, announced at the workshop he'd just had his book published, and immediately I looked at him and went, wow, that is I can immediately see how that's just changed. It's a game changer. I knew the guy, and I was looking at him going, well, now you're now considered an expert as far as I can see. And I could see how powerful that could be in his marketing. So I wrote on my 3-year goals on my pocket coach. I wrote on the 3-year goals, publish a book. Now this is me. I'm dyslexic. I was rubbish at writing at school and didn't particularly enjoy it. I had no idea what to write about. I had no idea how to write a book. But I wrote on my 3-year goals, publish a book. And then with every goal, as you know, or with coach, we break it down. So I said, well, okay, what have I got to do in the next year to have a book in 3 years? And I thought, well, okay, really all I've got to do is I've got to find the subject, find a working title and map it out. That's really all of it. And then I can do everything else in the 2 years after. So that's what I did. The idea bounced around in my subconscious for quite a period of time. And we were doing more and more retirement advice. And so I decided that the Dream Retirement was going to be the working title. And then as I was starting to map it out, I started to map it out on a flight to do warrior training camp in the forest just north of Barcelona. And so I was mapping it all out, and that kind of made me change some of that warrior training camp, made me change some of the ways. So I brought more well-being and more time into it, and it was less financial as a result of that. And then really I just happened to be introduced to, I was actually, as part of a warrior training camp sequence of courses, there was one where it was essentially a pitch fest. It was just one guy after another trying to sell his wares from the stage. But one of them was this lady that had a book published. She was selling a course called Publish a Book and Grow Rich with a company called Black Card Books that had published her book. So I went on this 3-day course, met a crazy Canadian guy called Jerry Robert. But the course was really good. It gave me so many good ideas. Now, I'd written a lot. I think by the time I ended up on that course, I'd written quite a bit of the book. So again, some of it I was looking at it going, I wish I'd known that at the start. I'm heading towards a 90,000 word book and he's telling me that I only need to write 30,000 words, but hey. But it just seemed to fit really well. He just brought a load of expertise in with, how you market it. And he said to me, on his book, I made $10,000 by selling copies of that book, but I made over $1 million from how that book impacted my business. And I thought he was talking about just giving away books for free and, literally putting adverts in the newspaper and saying, send me an email and I'll send you a copy of my book for free. I was like, that's crazy. But then you think about, a client to us is very valuable, in terms of the value over the life of a client. So we can afford to spend a decent chunk to market to get each client. And it just seemed to make so much sense what he was talking about. And it actually, we learned a huge amount from working with them. And again, I don't know that, I think it was the right thing at the time. I don't know that it would be the right thing to have done for number 2 or number 3. We were essentially paying a premium for extracting all of that knowledge that he gave us. But we ended up with a really great book. I'm really proud still 5 years on of what that book looks like. I mean, it's the sort of book where people, particularly the hardback, you pass them a copy and they're like, oh, that's really heavy. That's a proper book, isn't it? Because it's 90,000 words. It's colour on the pages because we put a number of charts in there. So therefore the paper is thicker. And then you've got the hardback as well. And it's like, wow, that's a proper book. So I'm still really proud of that book. Again, I'm not sure I'd do it quite the same. You learn from your mistakes, don't you? But it was good because we learned a lot on that journey. And really, when you're writing a book, it's not the sort of thing you do very often. And for most people, they probably only ever do it once. So you don't want to make all them the same mistakes. And we learned a huge amount from Black Card Books experience. And then when we did Smart Money, a huge amount from your experience. And, you just got to, and that's why it's so worthwhile getting, when I talk to people about using, in fact, in Entrepreneurial Happiness, I recommended, and I can't remember if it made the final cut or not, but I did put in there that they should look at Right Business Results, because the power of using a book is just such a brilliant thing for the business. I mean, the Dream Retirement easily made us more than £1 million in fees, easily. And I didn't get anywhere close to the £10,000 in book sales, but the way we have used that book to generate it's generated way more business and way better clients than I would have expected it to. It's definitely over-delivered in that sense.
That's fantastic. And thank you so much for the recommendation in Entrepreneurial Happiness as well.
You're welcome. I'm just hoping it made the final cut, because I actually can't say I went through it with enough detail to remember. But yeah, it was in there, and I think it still is.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. But you're absolutely right. It's all about how you use the book as leverage. And so when I'm speaking with people about their books, regardless of what, and you'll know from being in my authors group on Facebook that there are an increasing number of authors now seeking publishing deals and building relationships with traditional publishers, as well as going down the self-publishing route. But what's so interesting, and the publishers and I have the same view on this, is the sort of the ultimate book marketing kind of secret really is that the more proactive the author is, the better the results, always. And it's about, like you say, book sales. You know, the publisher will always take the lion's share, because that's their business, that's their bread and butter, that's how it works. It's a sort of commission-based thing in that sense. So it's all about the leverage, isn't it? And so I think when people are listening to this and thinking, well, which routes for me? If you're going to go with a publisher, as you've alluded to, you'll be required to buy a certain number of copies from that publisher up front as the author. So you yourself, you get them at manufacturing price, but you have a responsibility to shift certain, typically anywhere between sort of 3,000 and 7,000 copies, I think is pretty common for the author to have to buy from the publisher. When you're self-publishing, obviously you buy whatever you want or don't want. But the point is, the leverage aspect is still the same, isn't it? You still have to give the book away strategically, work it into your referral systems, make it widely available for the people who know you, but you don't know them. You don't know who's reading and following. You don't know who's going to pick up the phone.
With the Dream Retirement, we give that whole book away for free on our website. So the audio book or the digital version. And in fact, on the digital version, if you download the digital version, we then ask you a series of follow-up questions. And if you kind of qualify as kind of the right type of fit client, then we'll actually send you a free copy of the physical book. So we do all of that, which is just brilliant. So, the book opens up so many avenues, in that the book got me onto LBC radio, which I've been featured on quite a number of times since. Last time was only a month or so ago. But then when you're on things like LBC radio, you can if you go to efficientportfolio.co.uk, you can download a free copy of my book, The Dream Retirement, and you can, I talk about it in this way. So it gets you into opportunities. Being on LBC and having The Dream Retirement then led to me being on ITV as one of the retirement experts. So all of that leads on, but it then gives you the leverage to say, well, look, actually, it's what we call attraction marketing devices, which I think was I'm sure it's not Black Card Books terms, but I think I picked it up from them, which essentially is when you're in opportunities like this, you've got to have some sort of hook that people can go, oh yeah, actually I quite like the sound of The Dream Retirement. I'll go to the website, I'll download the book, I'll read it, and then I can, but that's like our best business card, isn't it? And that's the downside of using the traditional publisher. I can't do that with Entrepreneurial Happiness. I can give away the first 3 chapters, but I can't give away any more than that. And, and I think that's probably okay, because if somebody's read 3 chapters and they think, actually, this is a book I want to read, then probably they should be buying it. But in a way, it does make us slightly more careful as to what we do with it. And likewise, when we were talking before we started recording about recycling content, so this will be a podcast, but also a blog, you want to recycle content, and we're recycling content from The Dream Retirement into newsletters that's, when it's relevant. But we won't be able to do that with Entrepreneurial Happiness, because essentially we're in breach of copyright. So you kind of have to be a bit more careful. Whereas, the great thing about self-publishing and hybrid publishing is that you do whatever you like, whatever is a commercial fit for your business, you do. And that's why, I do wonder whether a year from now I'll be sitting there going, what, we should have just, stuck to the self-publishing, hybrid publishing route, because it would have just given us much more flexibility, and the appeal of using the traditional publisher hasn't actually paid off. But equally, you just never know, do you?
Yeah.
You know, you just never know. And if you've got a book, and I think that's what my advice when I'm talking to people about books is, if you genuinely think that this is the sort of book that you could see on a bookshelf in an airport, then, and probably everybody thinks that their own book is, but you genuinely think it's the sort of book that you're seeing there. You know, if it's pipe music for entrepreneurs, then you're kind of like, it's a pretty limited audience, and you're going to be better off doing that stuff yourself. If you think, actually, you know, this could go wild, then it's probably worth trying it. And then, but after 3 chapters, that's when you really want to be speaking to the publisher, because after 3 chapters, you've mapped out the whole book. You've got 3 chapters that you can give to them. They can tell you, yeah, it's a goer, and at that point, it's maybe worth building the book in with them in mind. And if they don't, then you go, right, fine, we can now move on, and we can do it the way that we want to do it, and it's all gloves off. And if you want to do a 90,000 word book, you can.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really good point, and I think that's what the publisher brings to the table, isn't it? Traditional publisher, it's mass distribution. That's what it's about. A lot of people, I think, have an idea that if they publish via a traditional publisher, that publisher will do all of the work on the marketing front, and they will become a celebrity, and it's just not how it works. The effort still needs to be there.
And in fact, all the questions they're asking you before they decide whether they want to publish your book are, right, how many followers have you got on social media?
Yes.
What public speaking do you do? What's your email database like? Basically, how many copies can you sell for us? Because as you say, you know, if you're not selling the books for them, then nowadays they're just not interested.
You're absolutely right. They want to know you already have a platform that they can, so that you take care of marketing to that platform, and they can then focus on the PR and the mass distribution stuff, and, you know, looking at international markets and that kind of a thing. But you're right. I mean, if, as an author, if you're not prepared to be, no one can sell you better than you, and I think that's definitely a point that I find myself making to soon-to-be authors quite frequently. But on that note, talk to me more about self-publishing then, because as you say, with self-publishing, the gloves are off. You can really just sort of do what you want. Sometimes that can have the opposite effect for me, that sounds like, yeah, great. I wouldn't necessarily want to feel restricted or to have limitations. If I see a commercial opportunity to promote my business via my book, I want to take it. But sometimes I think I've spoken with people who are a little bit freaked out, like, oh, well, then how do I know what to do, sort of thing. So why did you decide to self-publish Smart Money, and what have you found to be the sort of main benefits?
Well, I mean, I suppose I still think of how we publish Smart Money as sort of a hybrid, in that you helped us self-publish. Mm-hmm. So you took care of all the stuff that we didn't know how to do. Mm-hmm. And so with Smart Money, the idea was, so I built this system, a system that essentially was the content of the Dream Retirement, but I hadn't built the system until after I wrote the Dream Retirement. And so what I then decided when I was on one of my crazy courses at some point, was that what we would do is we'd publish 6 smaller books. I think I was following in Dan Sullivan's steps of, like a book a month or whatever he was doing for a while. In fact, if you look at all those books on, they're still going. So I thought, well, what we'll do is because the 6 steps were essentially prepare, which is so how to prepare your finances so that you can get to financial freedom in the future, how to plan. So how do you see into your financial future to know whether you're on track? How to generate profit from your money, so growth over and above inflation. How to generate a pension, so when you get to retirement, how do you turn that into an income? How to ensure your progress, so how do you ensure your financial planning continues to get better and better each year? And then finally, personal, how do you kind of manage the personal side of retirement? So we kind of got these 6, and I thought, well, what we could do is write 6 little books and have one little box set of books, but each one would be relevant to different people at different times. So you could say, well, actually, this bit's quite relevant to you now, so here, have this. And so that was the original plan. And the first one we did was Smart Money, which was designed, so it's the preparation stage. It's all of and it's kind of worked nicely because it was targeting more people at the start of their financial planning journey. So it complements the Dream Retirement really nicely in that we've got that designed for people that are in the lead up to retirement, and this is kind of more people at the start of their journey. So, our ideal client might be giving smart money to their children, but reading Dream Retirement themselves. But we didn't really, because it was seen as one of 6 books, we didn't really push it that hard. And then it kind of, the enthusiasm of the project fizzled out a bit, and we never did books 2 through to 6. But the great thing about that is we just, with the Dream Retirement, we had to buy 3,000 copies at the start, and that was fine. But we're still, 5 years later, still got 500 of them. Whereas with Smart Money, we just buy them as we need them. And it is a really cost-effective way of doing it. I think one of the things that also surprised me was that the cost of publishing was still more expensive than I expected. And hence, I think that was one of the factors why we didn't go through and do all 6, because actually we concluded, do you know what? It would almost be easier to turn this into, it would have been cheaper to do it as 2 or 3 books, not 6 books. But there was still a whole load of things out there, like how you get the layout done, and I'm sure there's people, we could have tracked down people individually, that somebody that could have done the layout, and somebody that could have done the artistry, and somebody that could have done the proofing and all that sort of stuff. We could have tracked those people down on an Odesk, or what is it now, Upwork. But actually, then you're just kind of making the same set of mistakes again. And we've got a lot of experience from doing the Dream Retirement, but still, I think we would have made a whole load of howlers had we gone along that journey. So it was brilliant to be able to say to you, look, we've written this book, but now we just like you just help us, guide us through that, and take care of that kind of self-publishing route. But I do think that if we hadn't done the Dream Retirement, we'd have needed even more help from you. Because, particularly with the marketing, actually we probably should have taken up more help from you with the benefit of hindsight, because we just didn't do a good job. It wasn't a big enough deal for us. If that had been our first book, we'd have definitely pushed that book harder, but we just didn't talk about it that much, which was foolish. So I think, and that's why I think your model is really good, because if it's your first book, you just need a lot of, there's so much stuff. Like the idea of giving books away for free. I don't know that I would have done that to anything like the level we did if it hadn't been for somebody with the experience of this industry going, that's the best way to generate business. And so that advice is invaluable, and that's how you turn a book from making you $10,000 in sales to $1 million or £1 million in your business, because it's those sorts of tricks of the trade that really kind of help you leverage that tool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, that's probably a great place to leave it for today. I feel like we need to have you back, because this conversation could go on. And you've also got the book launch side of things, 3 different types of launching a book that you've tried as well. So.
Yes, well, I did warn you, I'm not very good at not talking for very long. So, normally I'm happy to stand up and talk all day. So,
well, if we had the time, then you would have been more than welcome to, because it's so informative and so interesting. Thank you, and congratulations on the results of all of your books. It's no small feat, to be bringing in, to be able to attribute over £1 million in fees to one book, let alone 3, is fantastic. So. On that note, are there more books to come? Can we look forward to more?
There probably will be. They might be more of a team effort. I think we're going to start I think the next one that I've got earmarked, I've got 2 in mind. One is another financial planning one, but for our so we've essentially got 3 target audiences at Efficient Portfolio. Entrepreneurs, so we've got Entrepreneurial Happiness for that. People in the lead up to retirement, so we've got Dream Retirement for that. We need one for our 3rd target market, which is kind of post-retirement, more inheritance tax planning, that sort of stuff, building a legacy. So we'll do something around that, but it'll probably be more of a team effort with the Efficient Portfolio. I'm also about to launch another business called Triathlon, and I'm doing some podcasts with kind of world-class Ironman, ultra runners, running coaches, and it's just absolutely amazing. I'm really enjoying it. and there's so much great content there. So I might steal Tim Ferriss's idea and turn the best bits of each into a book. So yeah, they'll probably. I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like your Dan. So just a smooth sort of 4 or 5 in there, but that's
maybe.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Charlie. Where can people find you if they want to learn more or see your books or get in touch?
The easiest way to do it is to either go to efficientportfolio.co.uk. You can download Dream Retirement from there. I think you can download the first 3 chapters of Entrepreneurial Happiness. In fact, you can from there, and you can download Smart Money from there. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to charlieredding.com, and there's a few pages about me there and a few other things that you can download from there too, as well as the books. But yeah, those are the best places. And then I'm fairly easy to find on social media as well. So that all works too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Take care.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure.